and we will be sharing it on the ASALA branch page. We always have our lectures there so we can share these wonderful presentations with other people. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we do invite you to go to the Nationals homepage, ASALA National, because they have a number of good programs that are part of ASALA Television TV, which was started the middle of last year, I believe, and they've been going strong with other speakers that you might want to tune into. Dr. Jones can speak to that when she brings us some greetings. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Jones in a minute. Just want to let someone into our meeting here. I'm multitasking. And today we will have Dr. Jones, who's the president of the Bethel Dukes branch here in DC, to bring greetings. She'll introduce LaVonda Broadneck, who's going to introduce our guest speaker. You'll hear from Dr. Jones again later on, who will engage in a dialogue with Dr. Butler, and then we'll have question and answers based on the discussion that you will hear here today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jones, who will bring us greetings from the DC branch of ASALA. Dr. Jones.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Eric. Welcome everyone to the May presentation of the Bethel Dukes branch of ASALH. There are two other branches in the Washington, D.C. area, the C. Dolores Tucker branch, as well as the Shiloh Baptist branch. ASALH, or the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, was founded in 1915 by Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, in the wake of the film Birth of a Nation, in which African American history was greatly distorted, and supported by then President Woodrow Wilson, who said it was history written in light. Dr. Woodson took it upon himself with colleagues and others to basically move the needle into the real direction of truth and history regarding African American agency and participation. Since its founding in 1915, there was in 1926 the creation of Negro History Week, which has since blossomed into African American History Month. And then we have now also moved ourselves from around the country to international branches around the greater part of the Western Hemisphere and the world. So in the spirit of Dr. Woodson's effort to once again move the needle back and present the true history of American citizens and citizenry, we continue in that tradition to locate, share, identify, celebrate, and promote the history of Africana people. We are blessed today to have a dear friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Deidre Hill Butler, whose seminal work is investigating the interior lives of African American women and motherhood, and talking from her own experience that led to her academic inquiry. I'd also like to share with you too that the Bethel Dukes branch has been in a new space as with the pandemic. And so therefore we are all learning this digital video conferencing space. So we do pardon and apologize for any gaffes or hiccups we have. I will also put in the chat for you our YouTube channel. The Bethel Dukes branch has been blessed with persons who understand technology and have sought to record and upload our presentations to YouTube so you can see our previous presentations. And we encourage you to consider joining the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. As I said, that was founded in 1915 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson as an activist effort to basically move the needle back and make it a more incorporative and inclusive history. And then we have branches throughout the country. And in Washington, D.C., the Bethel Dukes branch is one of a triumvirate of branches who are doing the work of Woodson here in the District of Columbia. So we encourage you to look at the branch locator. If you are those, I think someone from Louisiana is joining us. We've had people from California joining us. But maybe in your locale, you'll find a branch of the association to affiliate with. And should you choose to, you're welcome to join us as well, now that we are in a digital space and virtual. So I'll put all that in our chat, but I look forward to an enriching conversation and once again, continuing the work of Woodson into the 21st century as inclusive, equity, and diversity of the Africana story in the American, or quote, mainstream history. I would now like to introduce Ms. LaVonda Broadneck, who is our secretary, to talk about our speaker on today and introduce her. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure today to introduce Dr. Deidre Hill Butler. She is an associate professor of sociology, director of faculty diversity, equity and inclusion, and the academic chief diversity officer at Union College, which is in Schenectady, New York. She's the former director of the Africana Studies program at Union College. Professor Butler was awarded the Leadership Council on Inclusion Award for her ongoing dedication to enhance inclusion efforts on Union's campus. A couple of her numerous professional affiliations include life member of the Association of Black Women Historians and the Feminist Mothering Caucus Chair for the National Women's Studies Association. Her research areas encompass the sociology of African American culture and African American women's representations in society. She's published widely in various Africana and gender studies academic journals, including the Journal of the Association for Research on Mothering. And she has served as the guest editor for an Africana Mother themed edition of the Journal of Pan-African Studies. Her current research focus is on the role of African American women in contemporary step families. Dr. Butler is a mother and a stepmother herself. In an article, she states, and I quote, "I find that Black mothers have often been villainized, and then Black stepmothers do the Cinderella myth or story. They have a double burden that way. So I did a quantitative study. I've interviewed over 100 Black stepmothers, and they have told me their stories." Today, her presentation is from her forthcoming book, Beyond Mammies and Matriarchs, Visibility of Black Stepmothers. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Deidre Hill Butler.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. I was like, wow, I like her. I'm gonna hang out with her more often. I'm just really, really grateful for this opportunity today to share my work and some of my thoughts. But I have to let you know that it's because of Ida that I'm sitting here. Ida Jones and I have known each other since high school. And she's the illustrious president of this chapter of ASALH. And then we kept the friendship going through attending ASALH conferences, I guess, for the last 30 plus years off and on. And I really appreciate her ongoing support and encouragement as well. And I also have some other longtime dear friends in the audience too. So I'm really grateful and thankful. So first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about the book and then maybe get some questions, or you could share your comments with me and have a good Sunday afternoon conversation. So let me share the screen. So let me know if you see this.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my forthcoming book, Beyond Mammies and Matriarchs, Visibility in Black Stepmothers, is really cornered in this idea that Black mothers are often vilified in our or pathologized. What do I mean by that? We look at Black mothers as something's wrong with them. They've been blamed for some of the larger social ills that are happening historically and in contemporary society. And then there seems to be this duality, this flip of Black mothers being heralded, or they're shown, sadly, currently in pictures of crying over their children who've been killed by police violence. That's like the image that we see often. And for Black stepmothers or women who take on this gift, I say, of joining families and becoming parents and nurturers to those who they didn't give birth to, but are committed in a partnership and relationship to foster. They're usually invisible. You don't really see much about them, or if you do, the controlling image around them is the evil stepmother, from the Cinderella stereotype or the Cinderella myth and fable and story. And usually that fable and story is told from a white gaze. I think this was the only representation of Cinderella that I could find that really was from a Black depiction. And I remember seeing this in the mid 90s. Brandy was Cinderella. Whitney Houston was the good wife. And I totally forget, maybe someone can remind me, who played the role of the so-called evil stepmother in the movie. But there seems to be these controlling images, as Patricia Hill Collins notes in her groundbreaking work, that Black women and Black mothers in particular are seen as actually, they're in the mammy framework, they're in the matriarch framework, or they are seen as the sapphire, the evil, the emasculating image. So I just posit that for Black stepmothers, they have this fourth component to deal with, this evil stepmother component, that especially when they're coming from a viewpoint of loving, of coming from a cultural knowledge that it takes a village to raise a family, coming from a cultural knowledge or exposure within their own family of fictive kin being just as crucial as blood relatives. There's a clash and there's frictions with that. So you might have your own value coming from a cultural Afrocentric standpoint of wanting to mother, to nurture, to be socially aware, racially undergirded and with strength. And then there's this friction with this negative stereotype of being a stepmother, being seen as an outsider. And often the value clashes with some of the realities. So I wanted to look at this because I was experiencing it myself, the choices I've made in my past too. But then I also was curious to see where this image of this clash took place. So finding the Black stepmother identity through the lives of Black mothers became like the key query for me. And I really ground this in a womanist framework or Black feminist frameworks. I use those terms interchangeably, and we can talk about that if you like as well. But this whole idea of coming from a collective sense, a communal sense of raising children, maintaining family ties, coming into families. Some of the women I interviewed had children themselves and they were blending their families together. Others, their first entree into motherhood was being a stepmother and then having children, birthing children within their relationship and navigating the relationships with the children and their partner through another blended family form. And then thirdly, there are women whose only experience was being a stepmother. So there was this idea and how they brought their full mothering selves to this. And a key component of Black mothering is this community element of keeping the family tied together, and also this value that that relationship, that real love, that the actions and those values permeate all these different titles and labels. So much so that many of the women refuse to use the term stepmother. they are just the mother. They see themselves and have built the closeness in the relationship with the young adults or the children in their relationship through their actions, displaying their true selves and through true commitments to this relationship. And it's also, I connected with women who volunteered to talk to me about their stories and they had already in their mind and actually rarely had vocalized that there was a set strategy in their minds. They just knew this was the values that they held and they were stepping forth with it. So it's part of, I say, or I look at it as a sense of resilience for Black family resilience. Because of these values that are displayed and it's ongoing. So the methodological framework was setting up a survey and sending the survey to, at the time, to many different listservs of women who chose to participate. And then I had as we call in the social sciences, I use a snowball impact. I had friends who were stepmothers themselves, and then they knew people. And oftentimes there were women that I knew through my other social networks of church relationships or sorority connections, and or professional connections, other Black women who were stepmothers, who are stepmothers, and they wanted to talk about it. And actually, they'd never been asked before about their beliefs and what they were doing. But in every interview, even in the written surveys, it came out that this was something that it was a conscious choice to treat and love their new family form, or the form that they felt they stepped into and chose vigilantly. They were really in direct engagement in this. And so it countered this negative, often controlling stereotype of being the interloper, someone that was uncaring or evil. But by no means did that come out in the conversations. And so I would say that this work refutes that stereotype, as does most of the times when we dig deep and look beyond the surface of stereotypes, we get to see such wide spectrums and wide ranges of family life, of Black women's choices, and of the strength and tenacity of our families. Another part of my work was after the interviews were done and after I did the technical work of coding them through using different computer programs and doing that part of it, I reread the interviews. I actually would take the names of the informants or the women that chose to share their stories with me out of the scenarios, and I engage with my undergraduate students. I've had cohorts. I've created a Black Women's Studies lab at my college, and I've used the interviews as a space to show narratives of Black women's lives and in classroom instruction and for studying elements of family life. And I teach a course on the sociology of American family. So I use some of the interviews, some of the survey data in that way. So keeping the anonymity of the informants or the people who spoke with me, but they get to see the context and the texture of a Black woman's choices and resilience through this research experience. So I've engaged in my own womanist theoretical and methodological process through the process of doing and writing this book. And then the third component has been looking at media images, television sitcom shows, mostly from the 90s, like the show Moesha, a little bit of the Cosby Show, because Denise, the character Denise, was a stepmother for a minute. I've had students code those or watch the television shows and describe the different scenarios of when there's interactions between mother and child, interactions between the, in particular, like the Denise's character with her parents discussing her mothering style and her care for Olivia. So that's been a part of this text as well. So getting how Black stepmothers depicted in movies and TV and within our own voices. So this it's an added framework to Black women's studies I've been engaged in as well. So my own step family narrative, yeah, over 20 years ago now, I met a man, and yeah, we just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary yesterday, but with Alan. But then in writing this book, I realized I had dated someone actually when I was at Fisk, who had a child, and he was a friend of my roommates, and so a Nashville native. I attended Fisk University, and I never had given it a thought of dating a man with children. And that relationship was it was eye-opening. And then I also realized that in my own family, I have 3 sets of grandparents, or I had 3 sets of grandparents. My father's parents were divorced when he was a child, and they both remarried. And then, so my grandfather was really my father's stepfather, but it just didn't really dawn on me that it was something less than or supposed to be. It was a norm, and that man, my grandfather, just poured into me. So I could see firsthand that blood is thicker than water, or opposite of that, the water can be thick as blood, right? So I walked into this whole project thinking about some of my own experiences, as well as listening to the ones that I was blessed to hear from so many women who wanted to share their stories. So the step family narrative, while doing this type of work, I realized that the personal is political. I really have seen through all my academic work that the personal is woven in to that. It's about building relationships. It's about showing the true face and complexity of Black women's lives in particular, from historical standpoint, but now in a current contemporary purview. And yeah, concluding thoughts, where the book is happening. It's drafted and being revised and should be out for everyone to read and consume by next year. A key thing, a piece of this is I have to show all the informants the work, as well as the editors in the press. I feel like I want to continue having focus groups and conversations. I've built relationships with the fellow blended family moms, and I think it's as part of my role as an academic is to share and continue to share what information is brought forth. And I'm very much aware that I'm showing a part of Black women's stories and Black women's lives that's rarely discussed. But I think out of that rarity comes a deeper knowledge of some of the choices that we make. I mean, the statistics about Black marriage are there's a shift. We're an ethnic group that has had family reconfigurations often, right? And I think a lot of the external or larger social image or social problem topics have really influenced Black marriages and long-term relationships. But at the core of this, I think we have a strength and tenacity that keeps our families together, keeps our families strong. And this faith is a major element of it. Every informant discussed that they had an element of faith, not in regards to being a step parent or mother. It was being a parent. I mean, just being a mother, period. They had to have faith because of some of the social ills that are going on, that have been going on with us and for us for years. So that was really key. And then we also like joined a sister type of hood, a way to get to know each other and support each other. And the last chapter of the book talks about how do we better support our blended families? How do we not see them as every other family, but see there's some unique transitions, give each other more grace and acceptance in regards to the challenges that our families may be going through when they're going through shifts in relationships. So what are better ways, like should there be more therapists that are aware of the scholarship that's needed? This whole idea of having a cultural notion of fictive kin and non-blood relatives meaning just as much. Counselors who aren't aware of our cultural themes, cultural backgrounds, need to be more aware of that and see that as a strength, definitely as and not as a deficit. So countering that is really, really important. And showing that that the strengths in Black family has always been that even though we've had a history of families being torn apart, there's been points of separation, especially within the last 25 years with mass incarceration and all these different topics. There's been so many rough edges that we've had to cope through. But showing the resilience of Black family, showing that we are still loving each other, supporting each other, and that there's degrees to which that we need to really investigate and continue to highlight even more. So thank you very much. And I'm open to asking or taking any questions and comments.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. We have one question in the chat so far that's asking, what were the conversations about women having adult stepchildren?
Yeah, there were a good portion of women who they were walking into a second or third marriage when the children were adults. It was more the relationship of being friends, you know, having not mothering per se, but seeing eye to eye and an equal playing field. So more conversations, more making your stake as someone that is a support. So the whole other mother framework comes into mind. You know, we think of the concept of other mothering, those teachers, coaches, social workers, librarians, the women who helped give a nurturing word or supportive theme. A lot of the women that I discussed, especially if they had older adult, they weren't in that caretaking role, but there were another woman that said, I'm here for you to listen. I'm here for us to talk, friends. I had a few cases where the stepmother was close in age to the grown children. And those conversations were interesting. I'm not trying to be a mother. I'm not trying to take a space. I'm just part of the circle, the family circle of learning that. And so that there too, that counters a controlling image that women can't get along, that women are, especially Black women, seem to be overbearing, part of that matriarchal, emasculating stereotype. And actually, most of the conversations and the memories that were discussed with me were ones of coming from an equal playing field.
And that's why I scheduled you during May, because this is Mother's Day month. So I guess our Mother's
It
Day.
is.
So happy Mother's Day to you and all the other
All
mothers
the
and
moms.
biological
Mother's
moms.
Day was what, last week?
Yeah.
2 weeks ago?
Yeah. So thinking about this, and I love what you're talking about when you say there's an element of faith that they had. Do you see this as bilateral therapy for both the persons who are being cared for as well as the woman who's giving the caring,
Oh my
in terms of
goodness,
how we
yes.
can kind of defang or take away some of the power of white supremacy in terms of the superimposed image of that? Could you talk about that?
Definitely. It is mutual therapy. I mean, I also had I did one-on-one interviews, but I also did small group focus groups with women who were comfortable with, who are each other casually, but they were open to talking about this topic with me and being recorded and discussing. The session definitely turned into the coaching, encouragement sessions. So I'm not trying to paint a picture. This is all easy. It's very difficult, but under the umbrella of mothering and overall, mothering is hard, right? So any relationship where you're doing nurture, care, bestowing wisdom, financial contribution, all of that, there's a rocky road. But what was key that would happen during talking about their mothering practices, yes, bilateral therapy, that's a fantastic term. I need to put that in there, Ida. I think I will. Because the networks are there. I mean, the networks of just talking about it and being visible, saying, yes, I'm proud to be, you know, a stepmother. In my case, when we moved to Schenectady, New York, 20 years ago, I came here with a 12 and 14-year-old boys who, and right, it was, it was, yes.
Boys have a
And I
certain
love,
energy.
they have
Boys
a
have
certain
energy.
energy. And there was a joke one evening that my husband said. He was like, you know, you guys, give Deidre, give her, it was my first time. I had not had any children before. So I walked into marriage and motherhood through being a stepmother. And these two young men taught me a lot. And we had our ups and downs. Yeah, they are grown men now. They're both fathers, married. One served in the military and all this type of things. But those were a rough couple of years. But I felt prepared when I had my own sons a few years later. So it's been an interesting, so now my sons, the sons I gave birth to, are similar in age to the ones when I first really became close to their brothers and or had their brothers with me. And yes, those sessions of actually the experiences, I didn't think I was alone with some of my confusion. So I turned it into a research project. And all these years later, still researching, still adding to methodological inquiry in many ways. So I saw it as a problem, as a good sociologist does. You see a problem, like, how do we fix it? And I knew going to the circle of Black women and talking to other women who've gone through what I've gone, or going through would be helpful. I didn't realize it would change like the trajectory of what I wanted to study. My dissertation work is more about Black women in the church. So it's closely aligned, but it's a little different, but it's all family.
And that's the bottom line. So I'm wondering now, was the mother of those young boys still alive? Was there some kind of co-mothering that you could do, or kind of co-parenting that could be happening between you, Alan, and the mother of the children, or
Right.
possibly aunts and uncles of those children from the mother's side of those boys?
Right. Good. No, she is alive. She's alive and well. And she lived very far away. And Alan had full custody of them. Our relationship, that's another part of the book. We talk about how women come together to say that maybe our differences are the way they are, but we're coming together to help raise our children, type of thing. And that's the attitude that we both had. We're very different people, but we respect each other. Yeah, and her side of the family wasn't really involved. No.
And that's fair, because sometimes they
That's
aren't. I think
fair.
people always assume that women are the ones like, why would the woman leave the children? Well, some women can birth children, but they're not made to be mothers. Because I think there can be people who've never had natural children who are far more motherly or mothering, because I guess it's that intrinsic character that you have to be this selfless person. And we're living in a very selfish society. So mine for me, and then get your own. But the way in which someone would be willing to sacrifice both time, emotion, and interest with students or children or what have you. You tend, like you said, librarians or in
Mhm.
the HBCU campus or even in some of the churches where you find this selfless person who may or may
Right.
not have had natural children.
Right.
It's very interesting to see. And then some men can even kind of be motherly as well.
They
Because
totally
when
can.
you look at men, you think of men are fathers and stern and what have, but some of them can have that kind of emotional caring, which is a softness. And I mean, maybe I'm being rather gender biased, so please correct me if I'm not being,
No.
gender
I
biased.
think they're all learned behaviors. And that's an aspect that I write about in the book about that's why I told you my story, like realizing that I was in a blended family, not even thinking I was until I thought about it a little bit because we didn't use those terms. We didn't see. And that's what I heard mostly from the women I talked to, that this wasn't something that was out of the ordinary for them. They had been poured into by non-blood relatives and particularly women that were really important to them. And so they were extending um, that point. But there was something you said at the beginning of your comments that I wanted to reply to. Yeah, I'm kind of critical that it's like instinctual that we're kind of born to be mothers. I think there's a lot of conscious choices with that as well.
Okay,
Oops.
we have one person in the chat who has a question, and I'm not sure if I should unmute her, if she's going to type it in. So,
Oh, I'll ask it.
okay, go ahead, sis.
How you doing?
Fine, and you?
Good. I thank you, Dr. Butler. This book and your presentation is excellent.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say, where were you 17 years ago when I was a mom and a stepmother, giving birth to my own, my biological child, but then I came into a marriage and I had a 14-year-old girl and a 16-year-old young man.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hell. They whipped my behind.
Mm-hmm.
Do you hear me?
I do.
Just straight up.
I,
And so I was reading books, but they were all by white women.
exactly.
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 It just didn't do it. It just was like, so I was like, okay, this is hard, man. And then I love what you said about the mainstream kind of ethos sinking into or being integrated into our mindsets, because we know that Black women and the traditional African-American family, we have been sustained through faith and love. And it hasn't always been about biological relationships, right?
Correct.
But somehow the mainstream madness supersedes that African mindset. And so that's what was happening as far as, my relationship is much better now. It's still kind of strained though. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's grown now and it's still like,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
Mm-hmm.
there.
That's why I'm sitting here smiling. Mm-hmm.
And I had to throw some dukes myself a little bit, like, okay, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just, the Virgin Mary sweetness. I can get with it too.
Right.
Okay.
And I think
Yeah.
the whole idea about a mom taking it and being selfless, and then no, and neither should the stepmother if she chooses to use that term. There has to be, and a lot of that has to weigh on your partner. The partner has to say, look, this is how you're going to treat her.
Exactly.
And this is, XYZ respect. And I had that support as well. And yes, it was a hard couple of years. And some people on the call lived with me through that, or at least heard some of my stories. So it's a lot. But thank you for saying that. It affirms what I'm doing, because the stereotype is so that we're not in this, but I want to make it visible. I want to make stepmother's contributions visible, the pain of going back and forth. Yeah, so there's room for this.
And I have one other question of you, Dr. Butler. Are you going to so once the book is released, I don't know, can we take it a step further? I mean, listen, a book is huge, but it's like now we need like little groups and stuff to talk about it.
Yes.
That was all. But thank
No,
you
sure.
so much for your work.
Stay tuned. I definitely see podcasts and all this type of stuff. It's it's important. It's important for us to get together and have conversations.
And Maria did not tell you who she was, but she's with the Capstone group of Howard University. So she has an interesting network of Howard alum who do these kinds of consciousness raising sessions. So she's someone that I definitely will put you in touch with so you
Thank
can
you.
still have this conversation in multiple streams. I see Eric White has his hand up, so I'm going to mute myself and have Eric go next.
I'm wondering, with the blended family, your family in particular,
Mhm.
how was the challenge of your adopted sons and your sons? How do they see each other? Do they see each other just as brothers, or as,
They do. They see each other as brothers, but then we have the distance. Like, so as a family, we're seen as a nuclear family. The four of us, we're seen as a family. So, and years ago, when it was my older sons and we were viewed as a family unit. So yes, they talk on a regular basis. Gifts are exchanged, advice is given. They don't call each other halves. It's not like that. No, yeah. But there's an age gap because these are grown men and then these are kids. So, but overall, yes, they have a relationship and it's consistent. So for right now, that's a good thing. And even from women I talk with who are part of the work, I often ask questions about, do you have family rituals together? Do you have an annual family reunion? Is there a way to, keeping everyone together, connected? And there's some instances of vacations together or, frequent phone calls, a lot of FaceTime since COVID. So keep in touch like that. But it's you still have to manage it, and I think the role of a mother in some families has been to keep everyone together. Usually it's the women that keep the community going. It's that way in families too.
And my second question is, did you come across any support networks through churches
Definitely.
that look at this issue and in terms of kind of keeping the balance going, or what did you find?
Yeah. Not particular like ministries labeled, blended families, here you come and speak, but with it, there's recognition of the family, right? Of the cohesion or the newness. So there's recognition of it. There's right. I'll just say there's recognition that the family may have different stresses and strains that have to be addressed. So I have not seen in my studies so far a ministry to raise up to say we're specifically attacking or dealing with blended families, but within family ministries, blended families are acknowledged and celebrated and brought in, right? So it's been that way. Not yet. I have not seen but with the numbers of families on the rise that are in second marriages, in some case third marriages, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a ministry that could tailor specifically this aspect of family. You think about T.D. Jakes was well known years ago because he focused on women, and women that are loose ministry theme. Maybe there could be something like that.
Yeah, families are changing.
Families are changing, but the consistency is the love and the ties and but depth families have changed.
Well, we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to give people a few more seconds to think about a question, but I wanted to also mention that the stepmother in the Cinderella with Brandy was Bernadette Peters. So I thought it very interesting that they had a white woman playing the stepmother. So that I would like to know, in terms of the optics you were talking about,
yes,
this white woman to be a stepmother to these Black girls and this third Black girl, which is very interesting. And then the fairy godmother is Whitney Houston. And I think Ricardo Montalban played the father to the prince. At any rate, so once again, in terms of optics of how we look at the Black family, unlike The Wiz, where we had an all Black cast doing all things, it's very interesting to see in terms of this particular thing with Disney, in this particular thing, how they chose to use the optics with that. So once again, how do we look at stepmothering or the qualification of a mother? Was a Black woman not even qualified to be a bad stepmother in Disney's world?
Or was it the case of they need to have at least one character in there? They thought the stepmother character was dismissive. Just throw Bernadette in there.
Yeah, I thought it was
Bernadette Stannis.
Yeah.
No, she
I got
wasn't.
confused.
The anchor was having the Brandy and Whitney.
Yeah. So there's more to that, but I think you definitely have created a cottage industry for yourself, as Maria and Eric have pointed out, that this clearly will be therapeutic needs, because the family is morphing. Even the definition of a couple is morphing, whether it be same-sex couples or multiple partner couples or what have you. So the 21st century is almost like the new frontier of how we define ourselves.
Oh, and I wanted to include, I did have same-sex couples in my study as well. So it's not just husband, wife, they're female partners, step family blended. So it's part of the study as well.
Very inclusive, diversity, equity.
Yeah, yes.
DEI, right? So, and especially for Black people, because that's happened before, although like women in Brewster Place, it happened, but we didn't talk about it, right? So these other quote spheres of family or identity have happened and we just don't talk about it. So now we're talking.
Making it visible is really important.
Yeah.
It helps with our healing, helps with our support.
Any final words from our audience? I'm seeing no questions in the chat. I will leave it to you, Dr. Butler, if you have any closing words you'd like to share with us before we wrap it up.
I don't. I'm surprised that there's some people that I see that there are any questions for me. Like, it's all good. No, I'm enjoying the process of getting this done. If anything, you've all poured into me to say, keep going, get this done, and then do more. So I appreciate it, and I owe it to all the women that that worked with me and shared with me. So I appreciate it. Yes, Dr. Lemieux.
Please unmute yourself, sweetie. Yeah.
She did.
By chance, did you talk about, I don't know, you focused on step parents where there are a lot of grandparents raising children in blended families in that way. I don't know if that was part of your conversations or maybe they were excluded from, I'm not sure if they fell onto your list, or did you have conversations with them also?
Definitely. I definitely did. There were at least 5 informants of mine who are now, they were primary caretakers of their stepchildren's children. So there's that relationship. And then some of them, became partners with older partners, and they are step parenting, grandparenting. So it's part of the work. But to give an overview, it's still the same theme of where do you draw your boundaries? What's the role of family members supporting each other? How is that articulated? How is respect garnered? It's been each person expressed that there's been moments of regret sometimes, and moments of a lot of pain that they didn't feel that they were given the same respect that a quote unquote traditional grandmother would have gotten. So talking through the context and the information helped in the relationships. I did find, I guess, being an ethnographer and a counselor sometimes blended in some of the sessions. Some of my interviews were 2 hours or more. So yes, grandparenting is part of the study. And now for me, I'm a grandparent, a step grandparent too, and we're sharing responsibilities and that type of thing. It's interesting to see that morphing.
Thank you for expounding on that. I think it's almost more of the trend as opposed to the exception as far as blended families go. And so giving some kind of oversight, I don't know if guidance is the term, but giving a framework that people can work from is really, as one of our colleagues on the call said earlier, is something that's really there's a void and
Mhm.
there's a need. And so I want to thank you for the time and the intentionality you've had with this work, because we've talked about this on and off. So thank you for sharing
Mhm.
that. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. And I'm thinking, I mean, as a culture, as a people, and you can chime in and challenge me. Some of us come from families where, if we have a problem, it stays in the house. If there's an issue, it stays. We don't really talk about the struggles, or they're couched in a certain way. And I think this is one of the trends and part of our healing. And some of our families need some healing. Um, and so telling your story with those that you can trust and that will respect you, it's important. So it's part of a larger idea about just Black women being supportive of each other and sharing and supporting, undergirding each other.
So we're going to bring this to a close. There was just a question in the chat about Black marriage statistics. I don't know if Dr. Butler, if you have those off the top of your head to share in terms of Black marriage statistics.
Yeah, our marriage rates are rather low right now. People overall aren't getting married in the same numbers. We have more singleness, and that has to, a lot of sociologists, this one particular, his name is Eric Kleinberg, talks about going solo. There's more people in their 20s, 30s, 40s remaining single, and because there's economic shifts with that. The average age of first marriage is 27 for women and 28 for men, and for Black women it's 31. So in Black men it's still in the 28, 29, because there's more. That's another whole lecture. That's another cycle on interracial marriages and all this. But overall, people aren't marrying, but partnering and having children, that seems to be pretty constant.
Biology wins out. Well, I want to thank you so very much. There are some accolades for you in the chat. I
Thank
also
you.
want to thank you for putting up the ASALH blue screen. So our National Black History theme is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. And that's what we were talking about on today. You're welcome to join us next month as well. We're going to have Chris Haley from the Maryland State Archives talk about enslaved families and the Maryland State Archives records that he's been working with. He is actually the nephew of Alex Haley of Roots fame. So he'll be with us on next month. So I'm going to turn it back over to Eric White to finally close us out. And I want to thank you, Dr. Hill Butler. Please read the chat. You're getting lots of good accolades. Back to you, Mr. White.
Thank you. Such a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. I think this is an important conversation that does need a broader base. And the fact that your research is opening that door, hopefully will get other people to chime in. And did you happen to find that when you started these interviews that these mothers were anxious to talk, in terms of just wanting to talk and kind of
Right.
bring these things to the forefront?
They've never been asked about their role. Yeah. See, I wasn't alone. So it's good to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Just like this was great to talk. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And I want to invite all the members and friends that joined us today to join us next month. Dr. Jones mentioned who our speaker, Chris Harley, is going to be next month. We have you down as registrants for this program, and we'll reach out to you next month and invite you back again. So, and think about joining ASALH and becoming a branch member in your local area. In this environment that we're in, we'll be glad to have you to be a member of the Bethel Dukes branch. And so we're trying to find creative ways of sharing information. And thank you for sharing this Sunday with us. And we'll see you next time.